Welcome to Meander Travel. This is episode number 19, Pompeii Tips. An entire episode about Pompeii, you say? Well, yes, actually. It's an epic place to visit, and it deserves its own time. But your time there could be epically miserable if you don't listen to this podcast first. But even if you don't have plans to visit Pompeii anytime soon, we'll sprinkle in some fun facts and tidbits that we hope will entertain and surprise you. So sit back and relax as we take you into the ancient world of Pompeii. Wheels up!
We're gonna be two hearts running wild.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Julie, and as always, I'm hanging out with my husband, Tony.
Hello.
Today we are again broadcasting from our navy blue bonus room, and that part is just for your context and imagery, so you can picture us sitting here in a blue room because we're not on video again this time. But so, dear husband, shall we tell our listeners where exactly Pompeii is that we're going to discuss today and how we ended up there this year?
Okay, well, if you've listened to our podcast before, we talked about pet sitting, and we talked about Italy and travels in our month and a bunch of our travels, but 8 months ago now, Julie found that there was going to be a concert in Pompeii at the Roman amphitheater, which is an incredible setting for Andrea Bocelli. So we moved heaven and earth to try and find a way to get to Italy this summer, and that turned into a month-long trip so that we could see our number one bucket list concert, Andrea Bocelli, and we got to see him in Pompeii in the amphitheater. So that's crazy. Now, Pompeii, for anybody that's wondering where that is, it's about a little over 2 hour train ride / bus and whatnot down from Rome. And it's just outside of Naples on the Mediterranean, on the Tyrrhenian seaside. So when you're looking at the boot, on the left side of the boot, a little over midway down. So kind of gives you a little perspective.
Yeah, so speaking of bucket list, that was our bucket list concert, but I don't think I ever asked you, Tony, when we were discussing Pompeii. Was Pompeii on your bucket list?
No. Surprisingly, as much as we love history and all that stuff, I've always just thought of Pompeii as, okay, some ruins and whatnot. Never, and I love going and seeing a lot of, Roman stuff, but I just never really had it as a major thing. I just thought, okay, it's a bunch of buildings in the dirt. I just didn't have a visual for it. I didn't learn about it a lot in school, and it wasn't an emphasis that I have to go there.
That surprises me so much because we love history and we love going to these ancient sites. But it occurred to me when I started thinking about this podcast episode, and I recalled, you know what, I don't think I've ever actually heard Tony say, oh, I can't wait to go to Pompeii someday. It's like right up there. And I realized, I don't think you actually ever have said that.
And Julie did nothing but talk about that everywhere we were going, like, oh, Pompeii. Like, she was so excited about Pompeii. I'm like, okay, we're going to go to Pompeii. But for everything, for her, like on that trip, of all the places we went, I think you talked a lot about going to Pompeii.
I was super excited about going to Pompeii. And part of that is because when I was a kid, like in grade school, I remember in 6th grade, I had to give my first oral book report, and I was absolutely terrified. And this is kind of going off track a little bit, but I was trying to decide what to do my book report on, and I was fascinated by 2 places. One was Egypt and the pyramids, and 2 was Pompeii. I just thought the 2 of them were so cool and super interesting. And if I was going to do an oral report, which I was absolutely terrified to do because I was so shy, then I needed it to be on something that I was passionate about. I ended up choosing the pyramids of ancient Egypt. However, I have never forgotten about Pompeii. And like 17 years ago, the Science Museum in Minnesota had a Pompeii exhibit. And my mom and I went to it, and I was completely enthralled with that exhibit. And one of my favorite parts I remember was walking through and admiring all of the jewelry, because the ancient jewelry, it was in pristine condition. And it looked like something that I would wear today. Like the styles were timeless and beautiful, and the gems and the gold. And I just was absolutely in love with it. And actually, and I'm going to just mention this now, but that was probably my biggest disappointment about Pompeii, was that I was saving my Italian souvenir dollars throughout an entire trip, waiting to buy some epic piece of jewelry, maybe a recreation of something that they had found in Pompeii at one of their gift shops. And I was super disappointed
Bum, bum,
because
bum.
they did not have anything like that. They had a little bit of jewelry. It was not, I don't know, very elaborate or pretty. It was kind of basic, like some just beaded bracelets or something.
They could make a ton of money off of mimicking their old jewelry and putting it in the
Yeah.
stores.
I don't understand. So, curators of the museum and ancient archaeological site, if you're listening to this podcast,
Oh, I'm sure they are.
you are missing a major retail opportunity. Yeah, that was my biggest disappointment. I really wanted a special piece of jewelry. So, anyway, wah, 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 like Tony said, that was very sad. I saved some money. But anyway, I will say that it was pretty wild being there. The night before, we went to a gorgeous restaurant called The Roof or The Rooftop.
The rooftop.
The Rooftop. It was beautiful. And the great thing about it was it had an amazing view of Mount Vesuvius. And I was also underwhelmed by that because when you look at Mount Vesuvius today, it just looks so gentle and calm because it literally blew its top off. And so now it's just this rounded shape of a mountain. It looks tame.
Yeah, when you look at Mount Vesuvius, you think of a volcano. You got this perfect cone up at the top, and you got this pointy little squared off top where it's going to be, all the lava is going to come out. And you look at Mount Vesuvius, and it looks like these kind of two lumpy, kind of just a gentle rolling hill.
Like a little camel
it's
or
tall,
something.
but it looks like a camel almost, and it doesn't look overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to kill all these people. But Vesuvius is only like 5 miles outside of Naples, and it is still an active volcano, and it's closely monitored. But the last eruption was like 1944, which caused a lot of damage. But I think that it's a green level. What do they call it? Green alert level right now, and it's considered one of the world's most dangerous volcanoes still. But that's only because there's 3 million people really nearby it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a lot different than 79 AD when it killed almost 1,000 people.
Yeah. So a green level means that it's a normal, non-eruptive state. So it has low-level background activity all the time, like minor seismic events and low levels of gas degassing.
Coming
And
from Minnesota, I don't trust that.
yeah, exactly. We live in Minnesota. We have mosquitoes and occasional tornadoes, but that's about it. So in this part of the world where there's significant geothermal activity, that includes frequent earthquakes, people go about their daily lives knowing that any time they could be dealing with an exploding monster. And that is so bizarre to us. But I mean, to put it in perspective, the entire city of Naples and the surrounding area, which Naples is the second biggest city in all of Italy after Rome, the entire area would all become a new archaeological exhibit if Vesuvius erupted again.
No,
That's
they don't have enough money to unearth all that.
mind-blowing. Well, true.
Which is a side note. I always wondered about, and maybe we'll get into it a little bit, but digging out Pompeii. Digging out Pompeii, I always, the one thing that we didn't learn is how they go about, how deep they had to go, what kind of tools did they vacuum, scrape, just with trowels? How do they get from 20 feet high above these building ruins down to where they are now, where it looks like just perfect buildings? What does that process look like, and how long does that take? I never really learned that, and I wish I would have. Anyways, back onto the eruptions. That if Julie's talking about the like needing an evacuation, maybe if this goes off now, what happens? They need 72 hours, basically a window, to get everybody out of it, and they have evacuation policies to get out of the death zone.
Dun, dun, dun.
But I think that if you know traffic at all in Italy and around Naples, you give them 72 hours, they might get 6 blocks. I mean, it is the craziest traffic area I've ever seen, and the drivers. So I don't know if they're going to be clearing 3 million people in 72 hours.
That isn't even bear thinking about. Seriously, that is crazy. Well, luckily there were no eruptions. There weren't even any earthquakes while we were there. But ironically, we no more than got down to the Amalfi Coast right after we left the Naples area, and they had the biggest earthquake they'd had in 10 years.
Right where we were.
Yeah, right. Just crazy. So because I was curious, I did do some digging, and there's a website called volcanodiscovery.com. and it tracks all the earthquakes in that region that are more than 0.5 on the Richter scale. And when I was looking at it, it's literally a daily occurrence. And not only that, it's a multi-daily occurrence. There would be like August 25th, and there's 5 or 6 that day, and then the next day there's 5 or 6. I was very surprised by that, but most of them are less than 2 on the Richter scale, and they say that at that level they're probably undetectable, but at about 2.5 you're going to start feeling things.
And being from Minnesota, is it weird that I wanted to feel one? I wanted to be in an earthquake. Hopefully not that bad of an earthquake, but something that you can just feel the tremble. I wanted that. And when we got to our pet sit, they actually they gave us 101 on earthquake procedures, and we're like, oh, this is real. And
Yeah.
Pazuli, which was just nearby, like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes away, that's where majority of all this geothermic activity is, and they have earthquakes all the time, but they're small.
Yeah, that's nuts. It was literally in her handbook to us. Like, so we got to talk about earthquakes. And we're like, what? Yeah, that was crazy. But okay, so we kind of digressed a little bit. Let's get back to talking about Pompeii.
So we one thing that Julie and I were thinking we were kind of losing our minds on is that we kept on seeing signs for Pompeii and for Pompeii. I'd say that wrong on purpose because it's spelled 2 different ways. There's Pompei and Pompei. Now, we thought that there was just people making mistakes, or maybe they were doing it in English for us. We didn't really know what was the case there. And we found that Pompei is for the modern city of Pompeii, and the Pompei, repeat some more letters, Tony, please. The II ending is for the ancient Pompeii ruins.
Yes, they are very distinctive and separate. So one way to remember it is that the ancient city had 2 eyes, and then when volcano blew up, it lopped off an eye. And so now the modern city only has 1 eye.
Is that how you're doing it?
Yeah, that's how I'm doing
You haven't
it.
told me that yet.
Well, I was trying to figure out how am I going to remember this?
No kidding. How do you keep it straight?
So anyway, we arrived into Pompeii by train. So Tony, what were your impressions of the modern city of Pompeii? And is there anything that you want to tell our listeners about that larger town?
Actually, I loved it. We got there and we had a really cool place right near the archaeological park. And we purposely picked up a place that was
You're
really
very
close.
good about finding places that are near where we need to go so that we do not have to worry about public transportation or walking too far.
We had a 3-minute walk to the entrance to get into the park, especially to the park where the concert was.
Yes.
So we could just roll out of our apartment, walk down, still not hot, get into the park. It was great.
And better yet, roll right back home afterwards.
Exactly. The town where we were at, where this rooftop bar was, and this really old church and squares, it's really nice. We had great restaurants. I liked it a lot. It's not as big. I mean, it's not a huge area like Naples. It's small, but it was. We had really good food, and it was fun to
Yeah.
walk around.
Yeah, so everything that we had read about Pompeii, they really recommend that you stay somewhere else, like Naples or Sorrento. But we were happy with our 2 nights there, and because we arrived in the late afternoon on the first day, we had just enough time to like rest and shower and then go to dinner at that rooftop restaurant and kind of gear up for our next day in Pompeii. And the modern city of Pompeii is a working town. There isn't a lot to see and do. However, near the main square, we did bump into a really interesting structure. Why don't you tell everybody what we saw? The Twin Towers girder
Oh, that
thing.
yeah. We were just wondering with our bags. I think actually were we walking? I think we were just walking down the street at that point, and we come across this art installation of this big chunk of metal. And we're like, well, that's not very. I kind of knew what it was a little bit right when I saw it, but I thought, no, that can't be right.
Yeah, it is iconic. When you see it, you're like, wait a minute.
Well, I've seen one
Is that
before.
what I think it
I've
is?
seen one of these art installations before, and I thought, oh, that looks like that. But I thought, why would there be one in Pompeii? And then we walk up closer, and it is a dedication to the Twin Towers in New York, and it's a huge. I mean, this is probably the biggest chunk I've seen from the Twin Towers. A big girder chunk of metal, all twisted and mangled, and then it's all it's got some writing on there about it.
And it's standing straight up, and it's able to do that because it's embedded in a base of volcanic stone from Vesuvius. So it was to honor the victims of 9/11, and it's also kind of a visual symbol of solidarity between the two countries who both experienced a major tragedy. And the plaque on it says that it was dedicated on September 11th of 2011, so the 10-year anniversary of the attack. So that it was very interesting. It was just unexpected to be walking down an Italian street and kind of stumble across that. But another thing that was very unexpected to me and probably was not to Tony because he is much more geographically inclined and likes to look at his maps. But I was literally shocked when we're walking down the city street and there is the gate to the ancient city of Pompeii. I don't know what I thought. I think I thought it was like set off somewhere in the distance that we'd have to take a bus to it, or it was some archaeological site far off. And no, no, you're literally walking down the street. There's restaurants, there's shops, and then right there, oh, here's a gate where you can go into the ancient city of Pompeii. I was like, wait, what? It's just right here?
I didn't know what to think either. I didn't have any idea prior to us going as to what it was going to look like or what the entrance or where it was. I was kind of surprised about that too.
Okay, I thought for sure you would have known. Like, no, it's
No.
right there in the center of town.
No, well, you got to think about it. I mean, that's where the town is now. That's where the town would have been then. It makes sense that they, build. If you go, I bet there's a ton of businesses and places, and we found this out in other cities in Italy. There's probably a ton of Pompeii that is underneath the buildings and things that are there now. That if people find it in their basements, they're not going to notify the government because the government then takes it over. And then it becomes owned by the government because it's archaeological, it's ancient, and so
Yeah.
people, if they're finding stuff in their basement, like, oh, I found some stones that are like in the shape of a building or something, they're not saying a word because then their house is confiscated.
Yeah, that is fascinating about some of those old cities. They are just built on top of another. I think this modern city is more built off to the side of ancient Pompeii. I think they're actually not really literally on top like some other cities are because they have a little bit more space out there. But
They did say there's a ton that they haven't even started yet.
oh, yes, so absolutely. So speaking of,
that,
yeah, I mean, it was a big research fail on my part, not realizing, where this was. But in your research, you realized that Pompeii is,
Well, speaking of research, one of the main tips that we kept seeing about Pompeii was that we should get a guide, and mostly because it's so big and it's 163 acres. You would just wander around and get frustrated, hot, missing things, not trying to look on your map to find certain things, and not really even knowing what you're seeing
yeah.
because it's just a map. It's not an efficient plan. So we had some friends that told us, hey, get a guide. So we thought, well, we will have different options here. We thought we could take a guided tour, pay a smaller fee, be a part of a big group, 10 to 20 people, or maybe a one-on-one. We didn't know, but we were learning about it, and some friends gave us some advice. So
Yeah, so one of our neighbors actually was in Pompeii last summer, and she passed along the name of a gentleman that they had used and they had really enjoyed. So we thought, what the heck, we'll contact him. His name was Francesco. And in 2025, summer of 2025, his fee was 130 euros for about 2.5 hours. That did not include the entrance tickets, by the way. We did have to go get those on our own on the official Ticket One website. And we had to get those well in advance because starting in 2024, Pompeii has now capped the daily visitors to 20,000 people. So hypothetically, they could sell out for the day that you want to go. So it might be important if it's crucial for you to go on a certain day, you should maybe get your tickets ahead of time. So we did that as soon as our itinerary was finalized. We went and got our tickets. But it was great because we met Francesco right outside the gates at 10 a.m. in the morning. And the very first benefit that we'll tell you about having a guide is that he showed up at the gate, and because he knows all of the people working there, he just showed his credentials, and we walked right in, skipping the long line of people. That was a really nice bonus.
yeah, we probably passed 100 people that were standing in a regular line. He just said, "Come with me." We walked around the outside.
Yeah, there were people that hadn't bought their tickets yet, so they were standing in a ticket line to purchase. And then there was people who had bought their tickets that were
in that
standing
line,
in a
too.
line to just get entry. And we were like, see ya, bye.
That's another side tip all the way. If you have bought tickets in advance and you going to a place you don't know, do not just go get in the long line because you figure you got your tickets, go and get in the line and go up to the front. Go have somebody walk around to the front, find out exactly, and just it may be considered rude from some people. Doesn't matter. Go find out where you're supposed to be because you might be in a line that's 3 people long. So don't stand in a line if you've already got your tickets just because everybody else is.
We have definitely queued up in lines because as Americans, that's what we do.
Yep.
We queue up. And sometimes we didn't need to be in that line because we could skip the line because we had a different kind of ticket. So that's a good tip, Tony. Definitely.
Another reason to get a personal guide or a private guide is they know exactly what to see. He's been doing this for 30 years?
Yeah, long
He's one,
time.
and he goes, "Oh, there's some people here that have been much longer than him." And I'm like, "What?" Anyways, he knew exactly what to see and where to go and what to skip and what like some things like, "Oh, everybody goes to see that, but you don't need to see that. It's not that, not that great." But over here, and then he would take some side street that nobody's on, and we would come around the back side of a building, and he'd show us something really cool that, first of all, we never would have found because it's, now when you're, just to give a perspective of what Pompeii looks like and you're walking around, it's stone walls, stone streets, stone sidewalks, and it all looks very similar if you're walking and just aimlessly walking. If you have an understanding of why you're going and where you're going, they start to show you like really detailed items like the cart paths and the stones that have been worn away and different kind of stores and telling you what and why they're where they are. And it's much smaller details.
I can't imagine just having been handed a map and say, have fun, like go explore, like what an absolute nightmare that would be. But to have a guide like this, it was so great because he was a storyteller. So he began with setting the stage, explaining that when the volcano erupted in 79, 1 o'clock p.m., which just gives you like some context. And you're like, oh, okay, 1 o'clock p.m., what were people doing? A lot of the people were killed by the heat alone. And then he went on to tell us that the eruption continued for 25 hours. And it literally covered the town in over 30 feet of rocks and ash. And much of it, like Tony mentioned before, is still not excavated. They are still working on it. It's crazy.
Fun fact, if you come to Pompeii in the off-season, instead of the busy summer like us, you can schedule an appointment to assist with the archaeologist and do some digging. Now, that would be pretty dang cool. We didn't know that, but we were there for a different reason, so.
Well, and I don't think they do it in the summertime when it's so
Right.
busy with tourists, but that would be amazing. We were literally like, okay, well, great. Now we have to come back because how cool would that be? And to answer your question earlier about like, how did they even get to all the stuff that they're like that, you could ask those questions. You would find out. You would be on a site with the archaeologist. That would be really, really, really cool. But anyway, another story that Francesco told us that I found entertaining, so that, you walk around and you see statues all over the place. And he said, well, the Romans had their own version of Photoshop. They would just lop off the heads of the emperor's statues, and then they'd just replace them with new heads when there was a new emperor. And I just thought that was funny. He's like, yep, that's their version of Photoshop, but very practical.
And also innovative, which is one of the coolest things that I saw. And I made a post on this on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, but where you can see the photo. They took travertine marble, which is white, and when they did their cobblestone streets and sidewalks, they took these little chunks of marble and they would place them in almost like a mosaic on the streets in between the big stones. And what it did was, in the moonlight, it would reflect light. So you would be walking down the street and it's all gray, field stones that are, for your carts, but you might stumble. But they had these little pieces of white marble. I'm like, what are all these little pieces of white marble? He goes, they're night lights for the walkers and the people with carts so they could see where the road is.
So
Brilliant.
Yeah, so cool. And also, too, it's so neat when you walk down the street because you can see the deep ruts of the chariots. And I just think that is just makes it feel like it's coming alive to you. I think that's cool. So we also got to see the fast food restaurants, and fascinatingly, some of them still had loaves of bread in their ovens that they found.
Fast food restaurants is a relative term for us, what we considered fast food for them.
Well, yeah, I mean, they might have had soups, sandwiches.
But they had a countertop.
Focaccia bread, and yeah, they had pizza. I mean, well, maybe not pizza because they had something like pizza, I think.
Yeah.
But so we got to see all those kinds of things. We stood behind one and pretended that I was handing out some fast food to Tony. That was kind of fun.
And for a visual, it really is like a storefront. Like the the ruins are there, and the tabletop is there, and the countertop is there, and then they had holes in the countertop where they would keep their food and different things in, for whatever they're
Their
baking,
pots.
pots and stuff. And you would walk up to the counter, get your food, and then walk away. It was like a takeaway.
Yeah, it was so cool. And you could actually see these places in the neighborhoods. So there'd be a street and there'd be a lot of homes, and then you'd see an area where these some of these restaurants. It just really looked like a little community, and it was cool to be able to visualize. So we also saw some of the Roman baths, which according to Francesco, he said the baths are what separated the Romans from the barbarians. And interestingly enough, did you know that Pompeii is actually considered to be the original Sin City? Yeah, so
Sorry, Vegas.
yep, sorry Vegas, you're second in line. So it's because of its decadent, pleasure-seeking atmosphere that they have uncovered. There's multiple brothels that they have found, which back in those days, I guess was actually legal. It's a form of
And
entertainment.
very common.
Very common. And Pompeii was a destination for the rich and the famous. They liked to frolic and cavort, and their depraved activities were captured in like erotic artwork on their walls and in statues and in these luxurious homes, like all over the place.
The artwork was not all dirty-minded, and it was, what made this place really kind of cool and stunning is some of the big brothel. There's one famous big brothel that you can go and see. The artwork is amazing, but it's pretty out there.
It's graphic, but if you had kids with you or something, they might not
They
notice.
wouldn't
They
know.
might just look at the colors and stuff. But I came away thinking, why in the world do we not decorate our homes like this? It's so pretty.
Not the brothel, but just
Well, no,
with some
not
of the
the.
murals.
Why don't we have dirty pictures on our walls? No, I just thought the mosaics and the frescoes and the murals and the paintings, like it's just so pretty. Like my house looks so boring. I look around and like, how boring is this? Like we should hire a painter to put murals all over our house. I was in awe over everything.
Awe. You were in. What is awful is the heat that we had when we were there, and we were there in June, and it was late June, and it was
Awful.
ridiculously hot.
Yeah,
The heat,
absolutely.
let's move into some tips as to how to avoid some of those things that we didn't know about or the good things that we did. Because you know what? And speaking of that awful heat, let's give 6 tips to ward off some of that heat and enjoy your time in Pompeii. There's a lot of things you can do and not do.
Yeah. So number 1 is bring an umbrella, or in our case, we had a parasol that I had picked up in Ravello. It was this cute little blue and yellow floral parasol. It was hysterical to watch Tony carrying it down the street, and he did not even care.
I embraced it.
No, it was like, give me the umbrella. And honestly, you need one per person. It was really hard for us to share the umbrella, especially if you're walking around like noon when the sun is directly above you high in the sky and it's casting basically only enough shade for one person to get underneath that. You cannot both squish under there. And in addition, like I had a hat on for a while and I took it off. It was killing me. I was actually hotter. It made me sweatier. I was much more uncomfortable with my hat on. So the umbrella was great. Yeah, another thing I would say is that maybe really think twice about.
Tip number 2, and this is going to be weird, don't bring your kids. That sounds like you should be bringing your kids for historical stuff, but anyone under 10 is not going to enjoy themselves. Like, strollers are almost impossible to wheel around in these cobblestone streets. There is little to no shade, and kids will not appreciate the history, and it is so hot in the summertime. So, Julie, tell a story about what we heard. It was so funny to listen to some of these kids complain.
Yeah, we heard a couple different kids. Like one little boy is like, "Mom, I've been walking for 300 miles." Like the poor kid was exhausted. And then another little kid was like, "Dad, it is so hot here. I hate the heat. Can we go on vacation somewhere cold next time?" So by and large, these families were not having fun.
No, the parents were miserable only because their kids were complaining nonstop. And it is something, to appreciate that kind of history. This could be dull and boring to a kid looking at old stones and, for hours on end, right? It's basically what it looks like. As adults, we can appreciate the history a lot more.
Yeah, we can visualize a little bit better, but these kids, it was tricky. And I guess know your own children, but my recommendation was not maybe bring your children. So anyway, another thing would be to, and this seems like a really simple thing to give away, but tip number 3, wear light colored clothing, whether that's white, beige, whatever. You guys, it is so, so hot. And if you are wearing dark colors, you are going to regret it. And I even thought that day, maybe I'd wear a tank top, and I decided not to. And I'm
No way.
so grateful because that was a sure way to get sunburn. I would try and put sunblock on, and I kept sweating it off. So I was actually really glad that I had a t-shirt on. That was an accidental benefit. And then if you haven't been in heat like this, you maybe can't even understand how your face is just sweating like crazy. And if you're wearing glasses, like my eyes were stinging from the sweat. It's not a pretty sight. So just make sure you've got like a little bandana or something to kind of dab yourself off a little bit, and that would help because it is just so hot.
And with that, tip number 4, bring more water than you think you can drink. We went through probably 4 to 5 bottles each, and having to find places to get more. And also take that water and wash off your eyes, because some of that crystallization of that salt around your eyes kind of gets that stinging. Just take some water, rinse off your eyes. That'll help as well.
Yeah, I mean it's just crazy. So tip number 5, and this was delightful. There is a cafeteria kind of
In the middle.
Yeah, it's kind of in the middle of Pompeii. And I would recommend that you get there early for lunch, because we got there probably towards the tail end and it was so crazy busy. But get your food. It's a cafeteria line style. The food is actually really good. And then go sit out in the courtyard, because a good breeze blows through there and it's nice and shady. And that is just a really great place to recharge, take a break, try to, rest your legs so that you've got energy to go on for more of the park.
And you have to actually look at your map for that one, because it's kind of a hidden entrance. Like you're just walking along the street, and all of a sudden, like, was this the kind of the path to get to the cafeteria? And it is just up some steps, and you're like, oh wow, it's right here. But you could walk right past it multiple times and not even know that it's there.
That's true. Our guide brought us there and said, here you go. This is a great place. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Let's go sit down and get some more water.
Tip number 6. This one's for Julie. This is her best friend on the trip. Don't forget your personal battery operated fan.
Or a regular fan.
Or regular, whatever that, Julie had also the Oriental fan, whatever you call that thing. What is it?
It's an accordion fan, just the
Accordion
guy.
fan.
I think they're Spanish. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of probably different regions of
Yeah.
the world all had this, because it's hot a lot of places. But I think I've got 2 of them in my purse right now.
So don't forget your fan.
Yeah. And then can I do a 6.5 tip?
Sure.
Yeah. So Tony thinks I'm a total dork. I don't care. I had a lanyard for my phone.
Yeah.
He's
She
like,
looks-
you look like an old person. Whatever. I don't even care. You know what? It was so helpful, because especially in that place, because you're constantly like picking up, take a picture, and then you set it down again to listen to your guide, and your hands are sweaty, and I didn't want to drop it on those, hard stones. So for that place, it was really super handy to have my phone on a lanyard. Yeah, it's swinging, off my neck, but we weren't moving that quickly. It wasn't that big of a deal. But let me tell you, that was nice to have, instead of trying to put it in and out of my pocket or in and out of my purse the whole time. So yeah, I loved having that.
Okay, tip 6.8. There's also places in the park that are, the park is big and it's very central, and then there's parts that are like winged off to the side, like 3/4 of a mile away. And we wanted to go to one of those really, really bad, and we didn't know if we had enough time.
And when you say we, you mean
Julie.
me. I was begging and pleading.
Yeah, so our 4 or 5 hours in the park turned into 8 hours in the park.
That's
And-
dramatic.
Well, that's pretty close. Anyways, you have to plan your time accordingly as to what you want to see, and probably don't just go to the park that day and think, oh, let's go see Pompeii today. Know what you want to see, and if you have a guide, make sure you tell them what you want to see and where you want to go. And because he's like, no, we're not going up there because that's just too far. So when we were done with our guide, we then proceeded to go and take an extra 2 hours, 3 hours of time to get up to that location and back.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned that because so when you are purchasing your Pompeii tickets,
Different tickets.
you can get just a ticket for Pompeii in general, or you could do an add-on ticket that includes the Villa of Mystery and then a couple other spots as well. And like you said, they are a good mile. They are inside the park. You have to walk a long way to get to this. Maybe that would be something that you should do
On a
right
Saturday.
away in the morning, even like
Or
first
the
thing.
next day. Or the next day. If you're going to plan on being. A lot of people do Pompeii in 2 or 3 days. And then they see it all. There's a lot of things. If you walk down every single street, you're seeing a lot of the same old kind of buildings. The buildings that you want to see are certain buildings, the baths, the brothel, the different things.
The
You can
luxury
you
villa
can do that in a
homes.
day. You can. If you're adding the House of Mystere or whatever,
Mystery, yeah.
Mystery, that is a good chunk of time to get up there and back. But it's worth it. It was so cool.
It was absolutely worth it. In some ways, if you could only see one thing in the entire park,
It might be that.
it might be that. It's a larger structure. So it looks like it's a villa. It's like a full villa that you can walk into. And it had multiple rooms, and they are all decorated with the most beautiful frescoes and mosaics. And
And
it
the murals
really,
are the probably the most colorful they have in Pompeii.
yeah, like
is up
the
there.
bright, bright reds. And there's a couple others, like the brothel one is that bright red too. But really, really floor to ceiling, large structure, gives you much better perspective and scale of the opulence. And we really enjoyed that. And I'm so, so glad that we went and did that because you were really worried about time. He wanted to make sure that we could get back to our apartment and shower and change and get some dinner before we had to turn around and go to the concert. But I was like, please, please, please,
We
please,
were
please.
wiped.
We took like a 45-minute power nap or something. We were dead.
And then we got to go back into the park at night for the most amazing concert. So, all in all, Pompeii, absolutely loved it.
Loved it.
The history was astounding, and if it's your jam like it is ours, you will not want to leave. You'll want to just stay there because we kept on staying longer and longer. We're like, we got to get home and get changed, but we just wanted to keep on staying and see some more. So, it's a really special place, a time capsule of epic proportions. It's so worth it.
Absolutely worth it. Yeah, and then to be able to go back in after after the park had closed, you feel very special. You get to go in another door, and then we walked into the ancient amphitheater, which we didn't tour earlier in the day.
You couldn't. It was closed.
Well, yeah, true, because they had the concert set up. But even if it was open, I think we would have waited because we wanted to have that spectacular entrance when we came in later that evening. And it's not that big of an amphitheater, and a lot of it is still not very accessible. Like you could only kind of stay in the lower rows. So it was just so cool to see Andrea Bocelli live on stage.
Or you could do like I did and walk up into areas you're not supposed to be and then get yelled at from about 100 yards away from a security guard saying, get down from there.
Well,
Don't
yes,
do that.
that was very naughty. And
But
then,
the
to
photos
be
are
fair,
amazing.
there were a lot of people that did that after you, and we're like,
Yes.
oh, that person's going to get in trouble. Oh, that woman's going to get in trouble. It's just so tempting. You just want to photograph from a better viewpoint. But
Well, we went in an hour early for the concert specifically because we wanted Mount Vesuvius in the background with the sun setting and an empty arena. And we got some pretty cool shots because of that.
yeah, it was pretty. And also, you should check their website because they do have other productions there sometimes. So you never know if you might get there and, maybe there is a play or another concert going on. So
But
that's kinda
more
cool.
with that point is that you also want to make sure that you can see the things you want to see. The people that were in Pompeii that day did not get to see the amphitheater. They could only walk around the outside of it and see the walls. And it's pretty basic from the outside. It's just this walled structure. But when you go inside, it's pretty epic. But they couldn't go in. So not only look for things that you can go see, like what concerts or productions, plays, but see what's closed on the day you're planning on being there. Because if there's a concert that night that you're not going to get to because it's sold out, you might want to know that, hey, I'm not going to get to see some of the coolest features of Pompeii because it's closed that day.
Yeah, so be aware, like for example, too, the women's baths were closed for some reconstruction. So we got to walk into the men's baths, but not the women's, and they're very different. So anyway, we felt so lucky to have been there. It was an amazing place to see. And we hope that some of Pompeii has come to life for you through this episode. And maybe it will be on one of your itineraries in the future.
So to close us out, one thing we want to tell you about is that we had a really cool experience this last week. Julie and I were asked to be on a friend of ours podcast as well, and it's called Treasures of Our Town, and it's really cool. There's some geocaching and some just traveling around, road tripping the country and finding hidden gems in places in our country. And they wanted to do a travel one with us, talking about traveling the world and the United States, and we had a great time. That one's coming out on September 1st, I believe. Treasures of Our Town. If you can't get enough of us here, maybe you can go and listen to that one. We do plan on having them or one of them join us in the future to talk about a geocaching and travel geocaching, which I know some of you people are like weird, boring, dorky, whatever. It's a cool, unique way.
No, I'm not weird. I'm not boring, and I'm not dorky. And even I like to do them occasionally.
There, and Julie's, if you can take it from Julie, and you know Julie, then you know that this is not just for dorks. Anyways, it's a cool way to see things. And these guys were great. We had a really fun time with them. Give them a listen. You can find them on all the Spotify and Apple. So
all the places.
Also, we have some new travels coming up that we're very excited to share. A new podcast coming, so pay attention and see us on the socials. Please follow us, like us. Please leave a comment and a review of our podcast. That would be great. Please do this. And we hope that you listen in on our next podcast. And we thank you for being here. So with that,
Wheels up.